Welcome to our channel, $1,000,000 Made Easy. This is a channel where we actually run numbers for people to show what they might have in the future. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a numbers guy who loves to set up spreadsheets to run numbers for people. And we use the actual historical returns for the S&P 500 for the last 100 years, which includes the depression years. So we're going to include some really bad possible future returns, as bad as they were back in the depression years. We projected what similar returns might do for you in the future. The resulting numbers are simply a possible range of what may happen in the future. They will be just ballpark figures. There won't be any exact numbers here, but these returns can give us some idea of what may happen in the future. We're going to look at the withdrawal stage in this video. We're going to see, do you really need to be a millionaire to retire comfortably here in the United States? Well, I'm gonna just pick a number. We're just going to pick 600,000, which is way short of the $1,000,000, which everybody seems to have for a goal. But what happens if you retire and you have $600,000 and I looked up the average Social Security for a couple, 2739. So let's say you're getting 2,739 from Social Security, which means you don't have to, whatever amount you pick. In fact, let's show you what we're talking about here. Let's say you need $4,500 a month expected expenses, which would be $54,000 a year. You don't need that $4,500 all coming out of your nest egg every month, because you're going to get 2739 coming every nest egg. We also want to do a 60-40 asset split, which seems to be what a lot of people recommend. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but so in other words, 60% stay in the S&P 500 and 40% going over some liquid account over here. So when the market's going down, these kind of amounts will be coming out of the cash reserve account. We also want to include a COLA. In other words, this amount you need from your nest egg. Remember, you're getting this growing by a COLA also. The Social Security grows every year. So we're just going to run this 1761, increase that by 3% a year. This is what's going to have to come out of the nest egg. The rest is being provided by Social Security, which is growing by a COLA. It may not be exact, but we're going to just assume it is at this point. So in other words, we're going to go ahead and run the numbers and see how it would have worked out for the last 100 years. And I can tell you right now, you're not going to have any problem, because this is below the 4% rule. That's 3.52%. And whenever you can stay 4% or below, over the last 100 years, you just don't run out of money. It's just incredible. The only time you have an issue is possibly 1929 numbers, but even in 1929 numbers, you're not running out of money. These are the amounts you'd have left after 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. And you see they're all basically growing. Looks like sometimes if it's yellow, it means it's less than the previous decade, but it came right back. In other words, after 10 years, you'd have, let's look at the 1929. That's the worst case scenario. You'd have 344,000 left. After 20 years, you have 218, and after 30 years, you'll be down to 177. Anyway, let's go ahead and up this a little bit. This is 3.52. What if you needed 5,000 a month? This is what I like to do on this channel. Let's go 4,800, which is a 4.12%. Let's just show you how important this withdrawal percentage really is. But just to show you, you don't really need $1,000,000 when you have your average Social Security. Again, this is for a couple. We could run it for singles, which changes everything. I realize that, but your expenses are probably down too. So at 4.12%, you still don't run out of money in 20 years. Which, here's the 20-year graph. You are. That's the 30-year graph. 20-year graph. You're getting low in 1929, 1930. You're getting low around the year 2000. Why? Because those were the two bad decades that we potentially could have in the future. That's why I like to include them. Nobody knows the future. 2000s, we had 4 down years, including this down 37. You had 3 consecutive down years, so that can really affect your returns. And it's getting kind of low. Look at the 30-year graph. You actually do, well, it's not going to show because it hasn't been 30 years since since the year 2000. But you can see you're running out of money there in 30 years. But that's at 4,800. Let's go up to 5,200. Now we're getting closer to the 5% withdrawal rule, which is somewhat above the 4% rule. Again, everything else staying the same. Your asset allocation, your COLA, your Social Security. We're just running numbers to see where you might be. Now you're running out of money 4% of the time in the last 100 years. That's all, folks. The last 100 years, taking out this kind of money, you'd be running out of money in 1928, 29, and 30. And it looks like the year 2000, you'd be running out of money. 30 years, you don't have 30 years for the 2000. But again, you're still being okay after 30 years. Look at the kind of numbers you could have. Now, obviously, you could change your withdrawals amounts and that, as you see. If you don't start out with some down years. They call that sequence of returns risk. If you don't have these down years like this consecutive when you first retire, you can probably take out more than these kind of numbers. But in this case, 4.92%, you would run into problems if we had returns like 1929, which is 4 straight down years. Look at 1930. 3 straight down years, you're still running out of money. This is a summary box, by the way, for each of these years I'm picking. How about if we had 2 down years, 1931? Now you've got money left after 20, 25, and 30 years. It's when you have those 4 consecutive down years like we had back in 1929 that you run into issues like this where you'd run out of money in 20 years and in 30 years if you included 1928, because 1928 had 1 positive year, but then it had the 4 down years and had the rest of these depression years. So 1928 would have been problematic after 30 years. Let's go ahead and move up the ladder a little bit from 4.92. Let's go to 5,500 a month. Now we're up to 5.52. This is going to change. This is the 40, how many times you run out of money in 20 years over the last 100 years, 4% of the time. Now we're raising this to 5.52. We're sneaking up there, so it's going to have more effect on how many times you'd run out of money in the last 100 years in a 20-year period. Now we're up to 7% of the time. Still, the graph looks really good, just running out of money during the Depression years and during the year 2000, 1999, 2000, 2001. The rest of the years are just fine. Let's just do one more. Let's go up to 6,000, which now we're up to 6.52. You're going to see this be raised quite significantly. Again, everything else is staying the same. The 60-40 split, the 3% COLA, what you're getting from Social Security. But I just want to show you that 600,000 can be really, really doable, really comfortable retirement if you don't need to have an extravagant amount. This would be 72,000 a year. Well, a lot of middle class people don't need that much in retirement because they say you need like 80% of what you needed when you were working. In this case, you're running out of money 25% of the time. If you go up to that 5.56, you can see some during the Depression years, some around 73 and 74, and some around the year 2000. Again, remember the decades. 1930s was a down decade, the worst one. 2000s was the second worst one, and 1970 was the third worst one because you had down 14, down 26, and down 18. So, can you retire with less than $1 million? And have a comfortable retirement? It depends on what you define as comfortable. If you need $6,000 a month coming in and you're getting this from Social Security, you're still going to need $3,261 coming out of your nest egg. And in that case, 25% of the time in the last 100 years, you would run out of money in first 20 years. But if you just needed, for example, $5,000 a month, forget what that one. That was 4.52. Don't know if it ran 5,000 or not. But now we're getting the percentage closer to the 4% withdrawal rule. That's the key. That's the key. Can you comfortably live on $60,000 a year with that going up by 3% a year? Then you just have the 1% problem over a 20-year period, and that was 1929. Again, if you have these horrible years, every other scenario, look at this. They're just growing like crazy. These kind of numbers right here. Again, if you start out with some very positive years, you can definitely take out more. You just need to monitor those initial years. If they're down years, they call that sequence of returns risk. That's when you really kind of monitor. But can you retire with 600,000? If your needs are 60,000 a year, it looks like it works in every case, except if we would have returns like 1929 and 1930. And it looks like 1927 and 1928 returns were kind of iffy too, because you did hit that. If you go to 1927 here, you can see you had 2 good years before you hit the Depression years. You would have had money left, but it wouldn't be maybe near as much as you might like. But you can retire comfortably in almost every scenario with $600,000 if your needs are $5,000 a month and increasing that by 3% a year. But that shows you what we do on this channel. Keep it close to the 4% rule, and you can retire comfortably on much less than $1,000 if your needs are around that 5,000 or so. But that's what we do on this channel. If you want me to run numbers for you, give me your beginning balance, your monthly withdrawal, your Social Security amount, and when you want it to start. We had it starting in the first year here. Your pension amount if you have one, and when that starts. And we'll go ahead and run the numbers for you. But please consider subscribing to this channel. Let people know there's a channel out there that'll run numbers for them, give them some idea of what they might have based on what's happened for the last 100 years, including down decades like the 1930s and the 2000s. Please comment and like these videos, and thanks so much for watching.